The morning began like any other. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the whistle of the kettle, the soft shuffle of slippers on the kitchen floor. All ordinary sounds that made Ellie Price feel safe. She reached for her phone to check the weather and saw it, a small red notification from the bank app. She tapped it absent-mindedly, expecting a routine message about low interest rates or monthly updates. Instead, the words froze her breath. Available balance. $0.00. For a moment, she thought her glasses had fogged. She blinked, rubbed the screen, blinked again. The number stayed the same. 0. Ellie's fingers trembled as she opened the transaction history. Line after line scrolled down, each withdrawal larger than the last. Thousands disappearing in minutes. Her eyes caught a familiar name on the account transfer. David Price. Her son. The kettle screamed in the background, but Ellie didn't move to turn it off. Her world had narrowed to the blue-white glow of her phone. It had to be a mistake. Maybe David had borrowed it temporarily, maybe the bank mixed up accounts. But deep down, a cold understanding began to spread. This wasn't an accident. She dialed his number. Once. Twice. Again. Voicemail. David, it's Mom. There's something wrong with the account. Call me back, sweetheart. Her voice cracked on the last word. She ended the call, stared at the silent phone, and tried again. Straight to voicemail. She tried his wife, Lena. Same result. Ellie set the phone down, the kitchen suddenly too quiet. The steam from the kettle drifted upward and vanished. The smell of burnt toast filled the air, though she couldn't remember putting bread in. She sank into a chair and stared at the floral wallpaper she'd picked 30 years ago. 68 years of saving, of cleaning houses, of packing lunches and patching clothes. Gone. A single tear rolled down, surprising her. She wiped it quickly, almost angrily. Don't cry, she whispered. Not yet. Outside, the world moved on. Cars passing, children laughing on their way to school. Inside, Ellie sat in stillness, her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the empty screen. The betrayal had not yet fully reached her heart, but it was coming, slow, heavy, and irreversible. By afternoon, Ellie was still trying to convince herself there had been some mistake. Maybe David had gone to the bank to fix it. Maybe he would walk through her door, apologizing for the confusion. But the hours ticked by, and the silence grew heavier. Finally, she grabbed her purse, locked the house, and drove across town to his place. The little blue house he and Lena had bought 2 years ago looked different. Too still. The blinds were drawn, the front lawn uncut. When she knocked, her voice echoed back at her. No sound came from inside. She rang the bell again. Nothing. The neighbor, Mrs. Jensen, peeked over the hedge. Oh, Ellie. You just missed them. Left this morning with suitcases and all. Said something about the airport. Ellie's hand gripped the fence. The airport? Yeah, Mrs. Jensen said. Sounded excited. Italy, I think. Such a beautiful trip. Italy. Ellie forced a smile of thanks and walked back to her car. Her chest felt hollow, like someone had reached inside and scooped out the center. At home, she opened her laptop, her hands clumsy on the keys. She typed, Lena Price Instagram. The page loaded slowly, as if the internet itself hesitated to deliver the blow. There they were, David, Lena, and Lena's mother, Martha, smiling in front of the Colosseum. Glasses of wine raised, captions full of hearts and hashtags. Hashtag family forever, hashtag Rome vibes, hashtag dream life. Ellie stared at the screen until her vision blurred. Each picture felt like a slap, the three of them basking in the sunlight of her life savings. Not a trip. Not a mistake. A plan. Her hands shook, but she refused to let the tears fall. Crying wouldn't fix a thing. Slowly, she reached for the old notebook that lived on her kitchen counter. The one where she wrote grocery lists, reminders, prayers. On a blank page, in her small, careful handwriting, she wrote one sentence. Asterisk, if they stole my peace, I'll steal theirs, quietly. Asterisk. Then she closed the notebook, smoothed its cover, and set it beside her phone. Outside, the evening sky was the same as always. Soft, pink, and calm. But something inside Eleanor Price had shifted. The mother who once forgave everything was gone. In her place sat a woman made of silence, purpose, and cold, deliberate patience. The next morning, Ellie woke with a steadiness that felt almost foreign. The shock had settled into something sharper, a quiet, calculated calm. She made herself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the small metal box where she kept every paper that mattered. Deeds, receipts, bank slips, even old letters from David. She began sorting them one by one. Every detail was a piece of a puzzle she hadn't realized she'd been assembling for years. On her phone, she logged into her online banking and scrolled through the statements again, this time not as a mother, but as an investigator. There, 3 weeks before the theft, a wire transfer labeled joint property liquidation. Ellie frowned. That was the small piece of land she had inherited from her late husband. She had told David to hold the title until she could sell it herself. Now she saw the sale had been completed without her consent. And the signature? Forged. Lena's touch was all over it. The smooth, tidy handwriting, the digital notarization she'd bragged about learning to fake for office paperwork. Ellie's stomach turned, but she kept going. She printed every statement, stapled them neatly, and labeled each by date. By noon, her dining table looked like a detective's desk. Papers, envelopes, sticky notes, and a cooling cup of coffee. She thought of calling the police but hesitated. Reporting it would make noise, attract pity. She wanted precision, not drama. That afternoon, she called Grace, an old friend from the cleaning company where they'd both worked for decades. Grace still did part-time jobs for a retired lawyer, Mr. Harold Carter. "Harold's a sharp one," Grace said. "He hates injustice almost as much as dust." 2 days later, Ellie sat across from Mr. Carter in his quiet home office, her documents stacked neatly between them. He adjusted his glasses, reading every page without a word. When he finally looked up, his eyes held both respect and pity. "Mrs. Price," he said slowly, "don't chase them. That's what they expect. Make the world chase them instead." Ellie nodded, her lips tightening into the faintest smile. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt a flicker of control, not from anger, but from knowledge. And knowledge, she realized, was the sharpest weapon she could wield. Ellie had always believed justice belonged to those who spoke the loudest, the ones who shouted, demanded, threatened. But Mr. Carter taught her otherwise. Justice, he said, belonged to those who listened, gathered, and struck when no one was watching. That morning, she sat in his tidy office as he filled out the first report, Elder Financial Exploitation, Immediate Family Member. Each form asked for details that made her hands tremble. The account numbers, the signatures, the relationship to the accused. Each answer felt like cutting another thread between her and the son she had raised. When they finished, Carter scanned the papers into the system and looked at her. "These things move slow," he warned, "but once they start, they don't stop." Ellie nodded. She wasn't in a hurry. Patience had been her companion all her life, through poverty, widowhood, and now betrayal. Together, they contacted the bank's fraud department. Using the evidence she'd gathered, Carter filed to freeze the international transfers. Within days, a red alert was placed on David's and Lena's joint account. The Rome Bank, seeing the notice, quietly suspended withdrawals pending investigation. Ellie didn't celebrate. She simply folded her hands and whispered, "Good." But Carter wasn't finished. "You said Lena works in finance?" "Yes," Ellie replied, remembering the woman's smug voice boasting about handling numbers better than people. Carter smiled thinly. "Let's see how well she handles this." Under his guidance, Ellie prepared an anonymous email to Lena's company compliance officer, attaching copies of the forged documents and highlighting her signature on the illegal property sale. The subject line read, "Potential employee misuse of client funds." Ellie hesitated before pressing send. It felt final, like closing a door forever. But she did it, quietly, decisively. By the end of the week, whispers began to move across the ocean. Lena's employer opened an internal audit. David's credit cards stopped working. Their luxury hotel demanded payment. Ellie imagined their surprise not with joy, but with a quiet satisfaction that hummed low in her chest. No yelling. No threats. Just silence and consequences. For the first time in months, she slept through the night. Not because the storm was over, but because she finally knew she was the one controlling the thunder. The Roman sun was merciless, bright enough to make even lies look honest. David squinted at his phone screen as another transaction failed. Card declined. He tried again, harder this time, as if pressing the button with more force could change reality. The same message blinked back. Across the cafe table, Lena sighed loudly, her designer sunglasses hiding the fury in her eyes. "Try the other card," she snapped. "You said the money would last the whole trip." David's throat tightened. I don't understand. There was enough yesterday." Her mother, Martha, stirred her espresso and said with acid sweetness, "You never understand anything, David. My daughter married a fool." He wanted to shout, to tell them it wasn't his fault, but his own voice sounded small even to him. Inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. That evening, the hotel manager knocked on their suite door, polite but firm. "Signore Price, your payment did not process. We must ask you to settle the bill tonight." David's hands went cold. He mumbled excuses, promises, but the man's expression didn't change. Within an hour, their luggage was stored behind the reception desk, and the family found themselves on the street, suitcases at their feet, the glamorous Roman night buzzing around them. Lena turned on him. "This is your fault. You said everything was handled." Martha crossed her arms. "Maybe your mother canceled something. You did steal from her, didn't you?" The word steal stung like a slap. David looked away, shame rising like heat. He couldn't answer. Meanwhile, across the ocean, Ellie sat at her kitchen table, sipping tea. An email from an anonymous embassy contact blinked on her laptop. Asterisk subjects currently under financial review. Travel status, stranded. Asterisk. She didn't smile, not fully. Her lips twitched, then settled into a calm line. The sound of the ticking clock filled the quiet house. She reached for her diary and wrote, "They're learning the language of consequences." The next morning, Grace called to ask how she was doing. Ellie's reply was simple, "I'm fine. Just keeping busy." She hung up, closed the notebook, and looked out the window at the still sky. Somewhere in Rome, her son was finally learning what silence could do. The days grew quieter, but not lighter. Ellie moved through her routines like a ghost, her body present but her thoughts far away. She still woke early, still brewed her coffee, still opened the curtains to let the morning light in. But lately, the light felt heavier, not comforting, a reminder of everything that had changed. One afternoon, as she was folding laundry, a sudden pressure gripped her chest. It wasn't sharp, but deep, like a hand tightening from within. The room tilted slightly. She sat down, breathing slow until the dizziness eased. She told herself it was nothing. Maybe she'd skipped breakfast, maybe just exhaustion. Still, the next day, she went to the clinic. The doctor, a kind man with silver glasses, listened carefully, took her blood pressure twice, and frowned. "Your heart's under strain, Mrs. Price. Nothing dangerous yet, but you need rest. Too much stress can turn small cracks into real damage." Ellie gave a soft laugh. "Doctor, if rest could fix a broken heart, I'd have been healed long ago." He smiled gently, but she could see concern in his eyes. She promised she'd take it easy. She didn't. That night, she sat at her desk, the glow of her lamp spilling across the open pages of her diary. She stared at the blank sheet, her pen motionless for a long time. Then, slowly, she began to write. Not about David, not about Lena, but about herself. About the years she'd spent forgiving small betrayals, the lies about money, the missed birthdays, the cold silences. She had always found excuses. He's young, he's under pressure, he'll learn. But he never did. Because she never made him face himself. Her hand trembled as she wrote the words that had been echoing in her mind for weeks. Asterisk, revenge is not to destroy him. It's to make him see who he became. Asterisk. She underlined it once, then set the pen down. The sentence stared back at her like a reflection. Not angry, not triumphant, but honest. Ellie leaned back, closing her eyes. Her heart ached, but in that ache was a strange peace. For the first time, she realized this wasn't vengeance. It was a mirror, one she was holding steady, waiting for her son to finally look into. The knock came on a Sunday morning, soft, hesitant, almost afraid to exist. Ellie had been watering the plants near the window when she heard it. For a long moment, she didn't move. Something deep inside her already knew who stood on the other side. When she opened the door, the man before her hardly looked like her son. David's shoulders slumped beneath a faded jacket, his hair unkempt, his eyes hollow. The confident grin that once carried lies now trembled with exhaustion. He held a single duffel bag, the same one he'd carried on the day he left. "Mom," he whispered, voice cracking. "Can I come in?" Ellie stepped aside without a word. He entered quietly, glancing around the small house as if seeing it for the first time. The clean curtains, the framed photos, the smell of lavender polish. Everything was the same, except the air. The warmth was gone, replaced by something still and measured. He sat at the table where he used to eat breakfast as a boy. His hands fidgeted on the wood. I don't know what to say," he began. "Everything's gone. The money, Lena, even Martha, they all left. I thought I was doing something smart. Something for us." Ellie said nothing. Her silence felt heavier than anger. He swallowed hard. "You knew, didn't you? You did something. The banks, the company, everything froze. I was humiliated, Mom." Finally, Ellie spoke, her voice calm but unyielding. "You took what I built," she said softly. "I took what you believed you controlled, your pride." David's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I don't know how to fix it." Ellie studied him, the boy she had once carried, the man who had broken her heart. "You can't fix it," she said. "But you can understand it. And live with that understanding." He lowered his head, his shoulders shaking. She didn't touch him, didn't comfort him, not yet. She simply stood, letting the silence do what words could not. Outside, the wind rustled the garden leaves, brushing softly against the window panes. Inside, a mother and her son sat across from each other. No shouting, no forgiveness, only the weight of truth finally shared between them. For several days after returning home, David stayed quiet. He slept on the couch, barely ate, and avoided his mother's eyes. The house that once felt so small now seemed enormous, every creak, every clock tick, echoing with judgment. Ellie moved around him with quiet grace, neither cold nor kind, just steady. One evening, as twilight settled over the neighborhood, she called him into the living room. A neat folder sat on the table beside a cup of untouched tea. "There's something you should see," she said. David hesitated before sitting. He opened the folder, expecting legal documents. Maybe proof of the reports she'd filed, or the bank's letters about the frozen funds. Instead, he found receipts from a local foundation, the Haven House Women's Shelter. Donation confirmations, monthly transfers, all under the name David Price. His brows furrowed. "I don't understand. You gave the money away." Ellie nodded. "Not gave. Returned. That money was meant to build a life. It still did, just not the one I expected." He stared at her, speechless. "But why put it under my name? After everything I did?" She looked at him then, really looked. Her gaze was gentle, but it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. "Because you didn't steal my money, David. You freed me from thinking I owed you." He blinked, confusion softening into realization. "Mom! You were my whole world," she continued. "Every choice I made was for you. I thought love meant giving until there was nothing left. But love also means knowing when to stop giving and start living for peace." The room fell silent. David's throat tightened as he reached for the folder again, tracing his name on the donation forms. His name, now tied to something good, something she'd created out of the wreckage he left behind. "I don't deserve this," he murmured. Ellie's smile was faint, almost fragile. "You don't have to. It's not a gift. It's a mirror." Look into it, and decide what kind of man you want to be next. Tears blurred his vision as she rose and walked to the kitchen, leaving him alone with the papers, and the unbearable grace of a mother's quiet forgiveness. Winter crept in quietly that year, settling over the town in a hush of gray skies and slow rain. Ellie had grown thinner, her once brisk steps now careful and measured. The doctor's warnings had proven right. Her heart was tired. Yet she didn't fear it. There was nothing left to prove, no anger left to carry. Only peace. David visited often, bringing groceries, fixing the leaky faucet, helping with the garden she could no longer tend. He didn't say much, and she didn't ask for words. Sometimes they would sit together in the living room, listening to the radio, the silence between them no longer painful, just full of understanding. One evening, when the house was quiet and David had gone home, Ellie sat at her desk with her favorite blue pen. Her breath came slower now, but her thoughts were clear. She pulled out a sheet of cream stationery and began to write, slowly, deliberately, as though carving her heart into every line. My dear David. Asterisk, there are things a mother never stops wanting to tell her child, even when time runs short. I have made peace with the past, and I hope you have too. The money, the mistakes, they were lessons, not losses. If you ever love again, give before you take. That's how you know you've grown. Asterisk. Asterisk, don't spend your years repairing what's broken. Sometimes you just have to plant new things where the ground went dry. That's how gardens, and people, heal. Asterisk. Asterisk, be kind. Be honest. And when you fail, start again. That's all life asks of any of us. Asterisk. Love, always. Mom. When she finished, she folded the letter neatly and placed it inside an envelope with his name written in careful cursive. She left it on the kitchen table beside a single photograph, David as a child, holding a paper kite. That night, Ellie lay down in her bed, the sound of rain whispering against the window. She closed her eyes and let her breath slow, her lips curving into a faint smile. By morning, the house was silent again. The letter waited on the table, her handwriting steady, her final gift, a legacy of love wrapped in forgiveness. Spring came early the following year, softening the air and painting the town in gentle shades of green. David walked up the narrow path to the Haven House Women's Shelter, the same place his mother had supported in her final months, the place now carrying her name on a brass plaque near the entrance. The Eleanor Price Wing, for women starting over. He paused before the sign every time he came, running his fingers over the engraved letters. It never failed to humble him. Inside, the shelter smelled faintly of fresh paint and hope. Volunteers moved between rooms, sorting clothes, preparing meals, talking softly with the women who had nowhere else to go. David joined them quietly, stacking food boxes, fixing shelves, repairing whatever was broken. The small things his mother would have noticed first. He didn't tell anyone who he was at first. It felt wrong to wear her name like a badge. But word spread, and soon the staff began greeting him with warm smiles instead of polite ones. Mrs. Price would be proud, one of them said. David could only nod. Every month, when his paycheck came in, he visited the bank, a different bank now, and transferred a portion of it to the shelter's fund. He didn't see it as repayment. It was continuation, a thread of goodness his mother had started, running quietly through his life. One evening, as he was locking up, he noticed a new addition in the lobby, a framed photograph hanging above the doorway. It was Ellie, smiling faintly, eyes bright with that quiet strength he'd only learned to understand too late. Beneath it, in simple script, was a quote. Silence can be the loudest justice. David stood there for a long time. The air around him felt warm, still, almost holy. He didn't cry out of guilt anymore. Those tears had already fallen. These were different, lighter somehow, the kind that come when pain turns into understanding. He whispered, "You were right, Mom," and smiled through the blur. Outside, the evening wind carried the faint scent of lavender, her favorite, and for the first time, David felt something he hadn't in years. Not forgiveness. Not freedom. Peace.